The movie opens with a scene of some army officers discussing an experiment in an army base. The head was advising them that because there isn't a war in our region or on our base, we can't use our best soldiers or pilots. Before we could use those officers, they either passed away or retired, so we conducted an experiment and built a space we call the sleeping chamber that is shaped like a box. The experiment will be carried out in a way that the human subject will move while sleeping inside the chamber where the entire body is frozen. That human will not die, nor will he age, and he will remain exactly as he was before entering it, and we will be able to take him out whenever we need him. The problem is that we haven't tried this experiment on humans yet. They find a man in their department who will be one of the 2 participants in the experiment. His name was Joe, and he was incapable of performing any task well. He also had no family, and the woman who was with him was skilled at duping others. They were chosen by the officers because no one will be around to question them if their experiment is a failure or if they pass away. Since they are alone and have no family, they are forced to sleep in the chamber. The woman who was with Joe was afraid, but he helped her realize that she didn't need to be because this experiment was held on the animals before us. Now they both sleep in the sleeping chamber. A few days later, the officers who were conducting this experiment were taken into custody for drug possession. The experiment site is destroyed by a government bulldozer, but Joe and the woman are still inside the sleeping chamber. Nobody knew 2 people were sleeping in those boxes. As time goes on, people's mental health gradually deteriorates. It was the year 2505, and the people in attendance were foolish due to the rudeness and lack of manners of the locals. Later, it is revealed that the chamber of Joe and the lady is still in the garbage heaps. The garbage that was piled high falls when another vehicle throws trash. A chamber falls in a man's house and opens automatically and Joe comes out of it. Joe was tired because he had been sleeping for many years. Now, as the officer said, the one who will sleep in the chamber will remain the same. Joe was still young today because he was sleeping in this chamber for 500 years. He inquires the man, "Where is our base? In whose house the chamber fell?" The man responds, "Which base?" Because of this, the man kicks Joe out of his house, even though he had no idea how he got there. He comes out and sees a few people standing, so asks them the address of his base. Because Joe was speaking in an old manner, the residents here used abusive language with him. Everyone in 2505 uses foul language with one another, and it's interesting to note that nobody seems to mind. However, Joe was feeling unwell as a result of spending so much time in the chamber. He visited the hospital for a checkup, and when he did, he found it to be filthy and lacking in recent cleanings. Joe moves on to drinking water, and the interesting thing is that instead of water, there was a company's drink coming out of the tap. He becomes worried because of it and then stops a man and asks for water. The man is taken aback and inquires about the water, which we use in the bathroom. Joe responds, "No, I need water," to which the man, who is grinning, turns and walks away. Joe visits the doctor and allows the doctor to examine his hand. In the meantime, he notices the newspaper, which mentioned the year 2505. He realized that he had moved from 2005 to 2505. When he sees it outside the window, he realizes he has traveled 500 years forward. Meanwhile, the doctor notices there isn't any tattoo on Joe's hand and shouts and calls the emergency police because the people living in this era have tattoos on their hands. It identifies the man in the same way that our ID cards serve as our identities. After making the man sit in front of the machine and put his hand inside, the police ask him to identify himself so that the machine can give him his name. When the machine showed him a number and asked him if it was his, he replied, "Not sure," leading the machine to assume the same thing about his name. It results in a not sure tattoo on his hand, and later, he was brought to a location where an IQ test was performed to ascertain his level of knowledge. So, when they imprison him, they will assign him tasks in jail based on his wisdom. They ask him the most difficult question in their world. That you have 2 gallons in one bucket and 4 gallons in another, and he was asked to count the buckets. Joe easily answers 2, and is then arrested, but he escapes while fooling the police officers. On another side, the lady who was kept in the chamber with Joe was named Rita. Now that she's emerged from the chamber, she's been duping people and stealing their money. Joe enters the man's home, where he regained consciousness. He was asking that stupid man, "When I came here, do you know anything about a time machine experiment that was held a while ago?" The man says, "Yes, I know," and then Joe asks him about the location, but the man says, "Why should I help you? What advantages will I gain from it?" Joe says, "I'll deposit a large sum of money into your account when I return to my own time. Similarly, you will become wealthy in a single night," and the stupid man now understood what he said and was leading him to the location of the time machine. Joe meets Rita on the way, but as they move forward, Joe is scanned again. This time, Joe was taken to the White House by the police instead of being taken elsewhere. He was told here that he has the highest IQ of any human on this planet because he has answered the most difficult question in the world. In the meantime, the president shows up and declares in his speech that we no longer need to worry because we have discovered the individual with the highest IQ in the entire world. The true reason was that crops in this world were scarce. They will now prepare the crops once more with the help of Joe. Later, they take Joe to a field where the crop wasn't growing and Joe calls Rita alongside the idiot there. When he sees the stupid man's map, he realizes he has made him a fool, and now he must discover the time travel machine by himself. Later, when Joe inspects the crops, he finds that they provide drink for the plants rather than water. The crops weren't growing because of this, and he tells them we need to water them even though no one drinks water in this world. Everyone, including children and the elderly, drinks beverages. They were not prepared to accept what Joe was saying, despite his best efforts to explain that we must provide water to crops in order for them to grow. Joe says something stupid like, "I can talk to the crops," and they demanded water. Now that they understand, they start watering the crops. The crops have not grown for many days, and the owner of the beverage company has also experienced losses. Many people once worked for the beverage company, but they are currently jobless. People who have lost their jobs as a result of Joe are now calling for his punishment. Given that Joe had already been given a death sentence, the time had come for him to receive it. On the other side, Rita and the man find the plants growing in the fields watered by Joe, which will be broadcast live to the entire world. They rush to the location where Joe will be given the death penalty, and they now send a cameraman into the fields to play live footage of the crops. Joe's punishment was revoked after the world saw this video. Joe then suggests using the time machine to return to our world, but Rita declines because she prefers this one. The president announces that Joe will be the vice president. When Joe declares that he wants to enter his world, everyone becomes depressed because they had high expectations for the character. They list all of the issues facing this world for Joe, warning him that if he stays, we won't be able to solve them. Hearing this makes Joe emotional, and he decides to live there. Joe and Rita got married, and Joe went on to become the world's president. The movie ends here. Thanks for watching and click on next movie recap displayed on the screen.